Hey everybody, welcome to Pale in Comparison, a proud member of the Duff Network. In this podcast, my sister uses her knowledge of the Otherverse to take a look at Pact, Wildbow's most ornithological work, and I try to not give away any spoilers. I'm Jen Ben, and Malia convinced me to read Worm.
I'm Malia, and Jen Ben convinced me to read everything else. This episode, we are covering Duress, chapters 12.7 and 12.8. Before we get into that, however, I'd like to issue a spoiler warning. This podcast is filled with pale spoilers. If you don't know about Ridget Fallbranch's war crimes and don't want us to tell you, stop now, read Pale, and come back to this podcast. As for Pact, there will be full spoilers to the chapters we are covering.
Yeah, I guess we should also say before we get stuck into it that the costume contest has just closed entries, which means you can hopefully now vote if you go to Patreon. If you want to decide which costume was the best, you have to be a patron. We'll give you more details on how to do that later, or you can just go to patreon.com/duffmedia, I guess, and it's pretty self-explanatory.
Those are pretty much the details, yes.
Yeah, that's all the details, but we'll say them again later, just in case.
Yeah, thank you for everyone who submitted things to the costume contest. It's always really fun to see what everyone comes up with.
Yeah, I saw a few of them as they were being posted to Reddit, and it's just like, oh, these are so good. Every time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, should we get into the chapters, sis?
Let's do it!
Cool. Well, let's just get into it, I guess. So, Duress 12.7, we begin right where we left off last time. They've reached the real world again from the tenements, and Blake gets ready to burn some shit down. Some of the others start to recognize him, so he has to ditch. But he's in firebug mode, which is funny now that he's made out of wood. Some monsters chase him, but he murders them pretty quick. Murdering monsters has apparently become his new MO. Starting strong, attacking some Duchamp practitioners apparently count as monsters. Culling the Rot, he calls it, before he then turns to the Behames. But surprise, they've got some new allies. A new weapon, Alistair says. A giant suit of armor. Or is the weapon a marriage with Rose? Which is a very telenovela ending, I think, but it's great.
Yes, definitely.
So yeah, what did you think? What did you think of these chapters?
It feels like we're like sliding into darkness really fast.
Us and Blake. Yep.
Yeah. Like it seems like, he learned that his friends kind of betrayed him, and now he's just like snapped, and he is like dark Blake. And he's just gonna kill everyone.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I think something for us to talk about as we go through these chapters is, what is Blake's sense of morality? Is there some lines that he's not willing to cross? And I guess keeping an eye on those is going to be interesting, because there's still this very fun, camaraderie vibe in these chapters between Blake and Green Eyes and Evan, as they're going around doing horrible things. So yeah, it's a bit. Yeah, I don't know what to quite make of it.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's still not just like Blake is doing absolutely the wrong thing necessarily. Like, it's very upsetting, and I don't like it. But it's Wildbow, so it's not just like good guy, bad guy kind of a thing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's very interesting. I guess, should we talk about some of the, because these two chapters, basically is Blake does murders, right? I mean, pretty much it's just Blake does murders.
Well, first, Blake starts a campfire.
Yeah.
And then murders.
Yeah. Let's start with that, shall we? So yeah, they've emerged from the top of the tenements, and Blake's plan that nobody seemed to agree with at the time a few chapters ago was burn down the house. Everyone was like, oh, that's a bit wild. And then Blake is like, well, now I'm made of wood, so that makes it all the better as a plan, I guess, thematically. So he starts collecting stuff to start a fire, and all the kind of grouped others outside of the Hillsglade house are just kind of hanging out and having, again, it's almost like a weird cookout vibe, isn't it?
Oh my gosh. Well, I was really surprised when Blake was like, okay, I'm going to take all the wood that's piled up and I'm going to drag it away from the house and then I'm going to start it on fire. I was like, wow, that sounds like really reasonable and not at all what you were describing earlier.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't actually set the house on fire. Like, there's a risk, and that's not great considering the fact that there's a demon that could get out if the
Yes.
diagram's broken.
Yeah.
But he didn't literally like set the kitchen on fire like I thought he would.
Yeah. Yeah. No. I mean, he does light a fire, and it's kind of obviously pretty chaotic thing to do. There's this interesting vibe a little bit later when he looks back, and I think it's in the next chapter perhaps, he looks back at the house and the fire is kind of being contained, and he's almost like wistfully sad that it's not just all burning. It's interesting. But yeah, so, in the process of lighting this fire, he ends up drawing a little bit of attention to himself, and people recognize him as Tree Blake, or recognize that he's, allied to the Thorburns, I guess, and he has to leg it. But yeah, I don't know, just like pure chaos vibes from Blake. Eh?
Yes, but like, and also just so hurt and so focused. Like, there are fun moments in this chapter or in these chapters, but they're not from Blake, which is a bummer. Like, I mean, Evan carries, all of the joy with a little bit of green eyes sprinkled in there.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's just very like he's almost like driven to find a new thing to motivate him, because he's like so upset by his friends. They're not really like an anchor anymore, and so it feels like he's just going and going and trying to find something to be like, okay, that's now the thing that matters to me.
Yeah, and I think there is this interesting setup of this dichotomy between, on one side, it's like Green Eyes and Evan that he can still kind of anchor to. Like, there's a few points where Evan says things like, "Oh, remember, we're going to all survive and fight the monsters." And obviously there's like this great camaraderie, but then on the other side, there's this like pull of the abyss to become a violent monster and just to be anchored by, I guess, the violent acts that he's doing. So yeah, he's really hanging in the balance.
Yeah. Blake. Because he
That's like the summary of these two chapters, isn't it? Oh, Blake, like just kind of a mildly disappointed but still kind of engaged vibe.
Yeah. Well, I like the conversation that Evan has with them as they're walking up the hill, because he's like, "Okay, Blake, like, what's the plan?" And Blake's like, set stuff on fire. He's like, "No, but there's like a bunch of scary others and we have to deal with them." And Blake's kind of like, "I don't want to talk about that. Let's talk about our future and how everything sucks." And Evan's like, "No, like, I'm awesome. Video games are awesome. People are awesome. Like, we're going to be super cool. We're going to fight monsters and we're going to like beat all the games on Tiff's phone or whatever. Like, we're going to we're going to just like do good and hang out. And so we all got to live." Cuz Blake's really not. He almost seems suicidal at parts. Like, he just doesn't care.
Yeah. Like, we've kind of been joking about the fact that he's made out of wood and is using fire, but there is almost this vibe of him. I don't know how close he ever gets to doing it, but like, snapping off a leg and throwing it, using it as kindling or something, right? Or like literally throwing himself on the fire as this like blaze of glory kind of thing.
Yeah, at one point, one of the serpentine neck women, I'm not entirely sure,
the
like
long necked ladies.
Yeah, oh, I like that. The leader of the long neck ladies, she says like, the fact that you're made of wood and trying to set fires is actually insane. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, speaking for all the audience at that point, I think.
It's just really funny. I was also thinking about, Blake and Evan have really similar vibes and motifs with the whole bird and like tree full of birds.
Yeah.
And then there's just like a mermaid like crawling around.
What a good time.
Just ready to eat stuff. And like, that's an interesting, like, if you saw that and then there became some sort of like wild what are they called, like urban legend or something about that,
Mm, mm.
like I feel like details would have to change because it seems weird to be like the tree and the mermaid,
It's
like they
just
don't.
too incongruous, isn't it?
Right.
That-
But
yeah,
luckily, yeah, maybe she's more resistant to fire, which could be nice.
that makes sense. I think that's the worst crime Blake commits in these chapters, is not having a solid theme that he's picked out with his group. Because it's all clashing.
He got close.
Yeah. Yeah, true. It's really just Green Eyes that kind of messes it up.
Yeah, she's so cool though.
She is wonderful.
Um, yeah. Well, while he's in his like dark state, which is this whole chapter, while he's ruminating
Mm.
about himself and Rose and whatnot, he says like, "I wonder what our name had been."
Yeah.
And yeah, I'd been saying bros because I thought it was funny, and then D-Dev and I like independently had the same thought that maybe the name was Ambrose. Because I was looking up like based on the theory that Rose, like they named their kid after Grandma Rose to try to curry favor.
Mm.
I mean, part of it might just be that she cut out, like Grandma Rose cut out all the parts of this person that weren't like her, and so like Rose was the perfect name for what was left. But yeah, thinking like Ambrose actually sounds like an actual name that Blake could have been. But then also like Brosif, because that's like bros and it's really good.
Yeah, I like Ambrose as a suggestion of, merged Blake name. I guess Ambrose's name. Yeah. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's a good one.
Yeah. Yeah, I was trying to figure out if there were clues based on the name Blake, and like apparently Blake both means dark-haired person and like pale or
Mm.
like shining. So there's like dark but also light.
Mm.
And if there's something there, I can't figure it out.
A contradiction, I don't know, like a, a clash.
Yeah, or maybe like he could be either one.
Mm.
Like he has the opportunity to be either one.
Do you think you would have been friends with Ambrose? I'm trying to like picture in my head, because obviously Blake and Rose are so different in a lot of ways by design, right? That it's hard to like reconcile. What would Ambrose have actually been like? Like, would I be friends with Ambrose?
That's really interesting. I mean, I think like part of it is looking at his friends and his connections. And like Ty and Alexis and Joel all seem like pretty good people.
Yeah, true.
There was also speculation in the Discord, and yeah, I don't know how much more we learn about the whole process of making Blake and Rose, obviously, but there was conjecture that like Blake plus Rose does not equal Ambrose, that there was like a lot of stuff lost.
Yeah.
Because demons or whatever. So possibly there was also some just like chill vibes. Like
yeah, true. Because neither of them have that, do they?
No.
Yeah. There's enough for a third person who would just be the most chill fucking dude ever. Yeah. Yeah, interesting.
That'd be great.
I'd probably be friends with that person. You're right. Judging them by the strength of like who Alexis, Ty, Tiff, etc. are as people, it is a good. It does paint a good picture, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting to think how much of each of their memories that they've talked about, like they can't both be 100% accurate, and so like what parts of them were different and changed, and like did Paige become a worse person when Grandma Rose messed up Ambrose, or like did she kind of suck and Blake's memories weren't quite right? Like it's just interesting trying to figure it out.
Well, I mean, what do you think that Paige seemed significantly different in I guess like the very first chapter as compared to when we saw her kind of recently in Toronto?
I mean, I remember that when when she called Blake when he was in Toronto, I think maybe when he was like when Rose was knocked out, I thought she'd been like body snatched or something. I was like, this is not Paige. Like Paige would not be like this.
Yeah.
And I mean, a lot of it just had to do with like their relationship and whether they were like whether they cared about each other or not. Because she was a lot of her self seemed similar. The like she has strong curiosity killed the cat vibes.
Mm.
And yeah, precocious and I don't know. She feels like a piece of this puzzle that hopefully will be explained more. Like
Yeah.
like was Ambrose just like that much better of a candidate than Paige? Um
Yeah.
or did Grandma Rose actually like Paige as a person? Like what was it
Well,
about
yeah,
her?
I mean, like, being closer to the front of the queue for inheritance is not necessarily a good thing, right? I mean,
Mhm.
Molly didn't do so hot.
Mm-mm.
Uh, yeah.
And presumably Molly was planned to be a sacrifice. Blake was planned to be a sacrifice. Hopefully, it seems like maybe hopefully Rose would have lasted.
Yeah.
Because after that, I don't think she had the ability or whatever to make Kathy into. I don't know.
Yeah. Into Kath and, I don't know, he, I guess.
Ren.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's interesting. Yeah. I mean, obviously, she's now long dead at this point, Granny Rose. But I
Uh-huh.
wonder if it was like, when Molly died, that's what split Blake into, or Ambrose into two, as opposed to, did she set that up like beforehand kind of vibes? I don't know.
Right, because I was almost like, I think that I had been thinking that Rose had somehow gone along, like when thinking like Rose was the full person and Blake was the vestige, that Rose had like gone along with the scheme to make
Hmm.
Blake, and that Molly was like in the house at kind of like the same time or something. Because at
Hmm.
one point she says, I think Ghost Molly might say that she had to get out of the house because she like couldn't stand it anymore, like
Hmm.
being in there. And I was like, oh, because of all the annoying crap that's going down. But it could have just been like she's been locked in her house afraid of everything for 4 months.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
there's also the question of, if everyone's memories are a bit altered, right? Like Peter remembers Rose and how much she sucks, and Paige is like, we were never friends. Like, how much is Molly's ghost wrong about
Hmm.
stuff?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. True. I mean, Molly's ghost doesn't necessarily seem the most like put together anyway, so it's she's not the most reliable source, I guess, just in general.
Molly. I
Hmm.
really thought she'd be a big thing this arc. I'm excited to see her
Hmm.
again.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess should we keep talking about Blake's slide into murder?
Yeah.
Yeah, Blake.
Murder. Oh, one thing that was actually really great, to go back to the conversation with Evan and Green Eyes
Mhm.
for a second, was that, Evan was like, I need everyone to be alive so that I can like fulfill my goals of being a badass and being a fire sparrow or whatever.
Yeah,
And he's
yeah.
like, this is why I need the Cabal, this is why I need you, Blake. And Green Eyes is like, what about me?
Aw.
Which was so cute. And he's like, keep telling me how great I am. And
Yeah.
she's like, I'd like to find out how good you are. And it's very obvious that she's like, I would like to eat you. And like, nothing but Green Eyes.
The dynamic between these three is just so much fun, isn't it?
Yeah. And that was one of the really like silly light moments of the chapter, but not. Yeah, again, it's the two of them, it's not Blake. Because
Yeah, true. Blake is he's very brooding this chapter, isn't he? He's not just letting himself have fun as he murders all his people.
uh, it's also like kind of, it makes so much sense that the long necked ladies are like a little suspicious, because he's just like, hi, like, I don't want to fight that other or whatever, I just kind of want to like make a bonfire, like
Mm.
whatever. And they're like, what? You're made of wood, is this a weird kink? Like, what are you doing?
No, but
You could
then
have done this somewhere else.
yeah, it is strange. But then there's that other who comes along and is like, "Oh, can I use your fire?" And Blake like is like, "Yeah, but you have to, do a favor for me." And so it's kind of like I could see it being this like industrious startup by some hip young boogeyman, like going around setting fires and then charging people to use them. It's like, I don't know, it could be a
And
business model.
see, and again, that kind of fits with his theme. Like, I'm loving this. That's like, yeah, the dead tree
Yeah.
and the fire, because he's like, I'm gonna go to where others are massacring others and set up a little barbecue stand.
Yeah, especially because, like, if he's a tree and they're like burning wooden furniture, maybe there's an element of him. He can pretend to be like, "Oh, I'm a nature spirit." That's like, "Oh, they chop down trees and turn them into furniture. I'm going to burn them down." Like, I don't know. Maybe that's like his cover story.
See, now I'm just like, if Blake had like Toadie's personality, like he could go so far. Like he could just be like, oh yeah, like murder and like this family and whatever. Like, nah, like let's start a small business. Like,
Yeah, small business renting out fires. It's a fire share app, and it's called.
yeah. Well, it almost reminds me of like, yeah. So I'm planning a wedding, and there's a service on Maui that's called the Catered Coconut. And literally the only thing that they do is they show up at your event with a shit ton of coconuts and like a machete, and they
Yeah.
just like open coconuts for people and put straws in it, and that's the only thing they do. And people are like, "Cool, I'll pay like $2,500 for you to come to my wedding."
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Because it's
interesting.
kind of awesome. But if he gets into the like, events space, he could go really far.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can. Yeah, true. He can be the bonfire at your wedding kind of guy. But yeah, no, it's. I think there's money to be made if you're a niche small business owner with a dream and some hustle. I support you, Blake. Let's do it.
Hmm. And I mean, again, I'm not sure, like, is the guy who comes up and asks to, like, cook his food, like, like, really, really creepy or, like,
Mm.
really fun? Because I found him really fun. Like, like, kind of pretentious and douchebaggy. They're like, we must be civilized. But also, it's just so great that he's just like, hi, like, I'm here to cook my meat.
Yeah, no, it is a bit weird, isn't it? But why not, right? Like, eh, be civilized, live your creepy vibe. But I think every single So what he's in a stainless steel mask. He's got handcuffs at his wrists, nice clothes, bloody hands, holding a bunch of midge flesh. All right, yeah, I don't know. A good blend. I think every single boogeyman is a good blend of creepy and fun.
Yeah, that's fair. I've enjoyed basically all of them so far.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess like does Midge come back from this? Because one thing I'm not certain still is like, is she abyssal? Like, does she is the shack part of the abyss as well? And like, because I get that like most boogeymen when they die go back to the abyss and can like get out again, maybe. But if they like cut your whole body up, what happens?
Yeah, it's hard to say, isn't it? Like, I guess we know in Pale we have like some characters that don't die in various ways, whether it's like the dogs who heal kind of in the way you
Mm.
might think of, or like the ghouls who are undead and kind of recuperate very slowly. Probably there's an in between there where something like Midge dies in quotes. It never fully, as long as she doesn't fully die, she can just slowly recuperate. Maybe it's over years, maybe it's over days, months, who knows?
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, yeah, she's had flesh and stuff like ripped off of her, but she's not dead. She's
Not yet.
giggling by the end of it. She's having a great time.
And the first time I read this chapter, I was like, "Fucking Midge! Like, how dare you! Like, god damn it!" Like, and then the second time, I was like, "Yeah, honestly, like, good for you, Midge. Like, if I was enslaved and the people who had enslaved me, just you don't owe them anything."
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, if she finds it funny, go for it.
Just like laughing at all the others who don't realize that he's right there.
Yeah,
Something.
yeah, good stuff. Yeah, so I wonder what's Midge's whole deal.
That's probably something that I'm happier not knowing based on her interlude.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Gosh, we've talked about so many of these bits and pieces. I'm trying to figure out which things we haven't talked about from this section yet.
I know. I mean, I think we can officially talk about the chase, unless did you want to talk about the long neck girls much more?
The long neck girls. Well, let's talk about it more because the long neck girls is one of the others that chases Blake,
Right.
right?
Right.
So yeah, they recognize Blake and the leader, whose name is Arne, and a few others give chase, but Blake just kind of murders them and gets the rest to stand down. He really is just like murder monsters, hell yeah, and just kind of does it. Although in fairness, he does give them a chance to back down, and some of them do. So pretty reasonable on the whole, I think.
Yeah, no, he he goes from like a more recognizable version of himself in terms of, he's running for his life and there's people chasing him, and so he's got to like defend himself, to I'm bigger and badder than all of you and I'll just start murdering you unless you can you can like show me that you're not really a monster, whatever that means.
Mm.
And I thought the one who was just like, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that, was like really funny.
Yeah, but it would be pretty funny if you're like, oh shit, there's the person we're meant to get him, and like you and a bunch of your friends chase him, and then all of a sudden he just stops and is like, actually, I can murder you all. You wouldn't believe it. I wouldn't believe it. Like, why'd you run then if you can murder us all? I bet we can take you. And then he does murder you all. Like, shit. Should have
It's kind of a
listened.
bummer.
Yeah.
I feel like watching the first one die, I might believe him more, as opposed to literally just being like, nah.
Yeah. Again, he's a tree guy with a bird and a kind of mermaid / seal-esque kind of thing. Like, it's not a strong theme. You wouldn't really be like, oh yeah, he's probably really strong. But then, he is.
Yeah, and then the sword is also a weird...
Yes,
the sword
true.
doesn't go with the tree thing, really.
A spiky sword, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We really need to get Blake a brand consultant, I think, before the end of the story.
Definitely. Like, we can maybe... I was going to say we could maybe glamour up the hyena to look different. I don't think that would work. But, maybe he could paint it, make it look more like a tree branch, something.
And how would you get Green Eyes on theme? Give her little wings so she's like a bird? Because she is like leaping around a lot, right? Like, she can kind of...
Or even more like a hedgehog, or like a groundhog, like something that kind of like pops out of the ground.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
It might only work in the snow, but like this book is not going to last until the snow is gone, so it works for now.
Yeah. What about like, she's always like clinging onto Blake. She wants to, in more ways than one, climb that tree, I think. But so like a monkey, could you get her like a monkey costume? Because she's like, she kind of swings around with her like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, and then you just get her like those costumes you can get for your dog or whatever, where they look like a little person because they have the two little fake arms. Like, she could have like two little fake legs, and just like, I like that. I think that's pretty decent theming.
Yeah. All right, Blake. Well, hit us up, and we'll happy to do some pro bono brand consulting work, I think.
Yeah, just to make you a little bit more cohesive.
Yeah. But yeah, so Blake murders some people. He goes, I'm only interested in killing monsters, and we get this woman who's like, I don't even know how to describe her. Old-fashioned clothing, cutesy voice. She gives me like a monster version of I don't know, like a 40s American housewife or 50s housewife kind of vibe. But then she pulls out a gun, so I don't know.
Right, and then it seems like she's related to old
old movies
or whatever, because she like
Hollywood vibes or something. Yeah,
dissolves into kind of like a film something. And that was really cool. She sounds fun.
Yeah, that's the tragic thing about reading Wildboy stories, is every single little side character has enough life breathed into them that you're just like, oh man, I want to know more about this old Hollywood film lady monster with a gun.
Yeah, I picture her as black and white. I don't know if that was described that way, but
I think she's in color, but then when she gets killed, she goes from color to black and white, and then the kind of film burning effect.
Right.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
And there's this other dude and a long-necked one of the long-necked ladies, Arne, the leader, who ends up being like, all right, cool. I guess I don't want to fight you after all. And bails.
Yeah. And we know she's working with Johannes, and so it's kind of a nice and that's the thing. This interaction feels more like he's maybe trying to defend himself, he's trying to make deals, he's trying to give people outs,
Mm.
but then we transition to hi, I'm here to murder you. Um and yeah, but the long-necked lady is like, if I tell Johannes good information, I get a free ticket to Disneyland, and that's worth it for me. So, they managed to make that work.
Yeah.
So it's like it's only a matter of time before people realize and learn that like Blake's not in the mirrors anymore is
Yes.
part of this,
Yes, for sure.
which is fun.
Yeah. And it kind of does beg the question, what would you do for a free ticket to Disneyland? How far would you go?
I feel like the like not getting in a fight to the death
Yeah.
and just snitching on some randos. Definitely. I would definitely do that.
Okay. Would you burn down a house for a free ticket to Disneyland?
Like, if no one was in it and it wasn't like an abandoned house and stuff, maybe, but I'd be worried
Mm.
about like criminal like consequences.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which, might not be worth it at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah. Interesting. Anyway. But yeah, you're right. Like the way that Blake treats these others here is almost more. Is it more? I think it's more like he gives them more of a chance than he gives some of the Duchamp husbands that we see in the next chapter.
Oh, yeah.
It's interesting. The last line of this chapter is, he sees there are practitioners and he thinks easy pickings, killing more monsters. So he really just does not rate them at all.
Right. And just, I mean, so even I, as a pale reader, was like horrified by this and felt more horrified by him attacking the Duchamps. And I'm thinking about it, and I think part of it has to do with the fact that this isn't really self-defense. This isn't really like trying to execute part of the heist plan. Like I was, thinking, okay, go back to your friends and report and be like, are you all actually out of the abyss now? Let's find you coats. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
but he doesn't consider doing that at all. He's like, let's just go kill some more people.
yeah.
And yeah, so this is him being the aggressor in this specific instance, although they did send a bunch of others to try to like murder him and his family.
Well,
So
yeah. Obviously, it's not a fully black and white situation, right? But I do think you're right that it represents like a crossing of a line for Blake. Well, let's get into it because like the next chapter is really where this becomes clear. I think, like goes into kill monsters mode, attacking some Duchamp practitioners, and the way he phrases it is culling the rot. But he does give some of them that seem more nice a chance to leave, and he does do this hilarious thing where he says, he basically asks point blank, are you a monster, to one of them, and they obviously are. Like they can't deny, they don't even try to deny that they're a monster. So
I mean that part made me feel a little bit better.
yes.
But also like there's probably a better judicial system or something.
No, I don't know about that. Just ask everyone if they're a monster, and if they can't even I'm a human being, as every human being does. I've made some mistakes in my life, right?
Uh-huh.
But if somebody asked me, "Am I a monster?" I'd at least attempt to mount a defense, right? Like, if you can't even attempt it, shit, man, you're fucking far gone.
That's true. He was like, this is tradition, and Blake's like,
Yeah,
that didn't answer my question.
yeah. It's rough to God.
Yeah, the Blake describing this as culling is horrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think it's normally, it's a word you use for animals, I think. It's I don't know, it feels like a familiar piece of rhetoric from some like scary person in real life. Like
Yeah,
it gives me kind of like Nazi vibes or something, and I
yeah.
don't
It's
think,
genocidal for sure.
yeah. And so it sucks.
Mm.
But then like there's the interesting thing where yeah, like those dudes can't say I'm not a monster. And the um Lola's mom like uses this as an opportunity to save one of her relatives from a shitty husband.
Mm.
It's an interesting scenario that unfolds. But it's like, what if it wasn't Lola's mom, like, on the phone separated from their group? What if it was Jan? What if it was the necromancer? Like, like, what if it was any of those other people? It feels kind of random in
Mm.
Blake's assessment of who deserves to die.
Yeah.
And like, killing these 4 practitioners doesn't seem to accomplish. I mean, I haven't seen the consequences, but it doesn't seem like, aha, I've dealt a decisive blow against the Duchamp family.
Mm.
Like, more like I've enraged them, and, you know.
Yeah, maybe. We know that Joyce is the one that he kind
Yes,
of
that's the name.
starts by holding them hostage, and then she swears to not interfere with his murder spree. Basically, um, she's kind of taken out of the picture. Like that, he is taking some pieces off the board. It definitely feels like
That's
these
true.
are pretty minor pieces, all things considered. But the night is young.
Right. Like, if he could keep this up, he would kill and or like eliminate enough threats by oaths that
Mm,
it could make a difference. But
yeah.
there's a reason he doesn't just leap over and murder them all in one fell swoop, other than maybe arguably having to check if they're monsters. Like,
Mm,
there's a certain level at which, like, the 3 of them can't just take this entire town. And
yeah.
so, yeah. I loved this conversation between Joyce and Lola. Um, the idea that, one of her cousins is there and she's being annoying and she's putting snowballs in the freezer and she won't go to sleep, and that's all just really fun.
Mm,
Um, and it reminds me a lot of the conversation Penny has with her mom, uh,
mm.
in like arc 2 or whatever that was.
Yeah, back when they're in the alleyway, right?
Mm-hmm. And like, the whole Duchamp vibe of like, it seems like they're really loyal to each other and they all really care about each other, but every generation is so awful to the next
Mm,
generation.
mm,
Um, but it's like, because of this sense of gaining power as practitioners, but they all obviously, love their, I mean, not all, but the moms we've seen, especially in Pact, really love their daughters.
mm.
Um, even if they're willing to do shitty things to them.
Yeah, I really think there is this vibe of just being stuck in this system, right?
Mhm,
That's I think something that permeates this so much, and we see it with some other like practitioner families in Pale as well, right? We see
mhm.
the fuck. Why can't I remember their name? The augury people that Nicolette is a part of. Why can I
The
not remember their
Bellingers,
name?
yeah.
Bellinger. I kept wanting to say Bahame. Like, no,
Yep,
that's
that's
not
my
the right
problem.
story. Yeah, the same vibe of like genuinely caring about your child and wanting a better life for them, but also just having been stuck in this system that means you eventually just repeat the same thing that you hated from your parents. And I
Mhm.
mean, it sucks, right? Like, it makes you want to go all Blake and just burn the house down.
Yeah. Um, yeah. It's
Hmm.
just an interesting tender scene, and it makes it really scary, and like, I very much related to Joyce and sympathized with her in this moment, and not really like the scary tree man that had just
Yeah,
like leaped over the fence and held a really bad scary knife to your throat. Um
yeah. I
and
think. Oh,
yeah.
sorry.
Well, it's interesting how in that moment, yeah, I really just was like, Blake, stop, go away, don't do this. Like,
Hmm.
feeling a lot for her, and yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very. That phone conversation maybe saves her life, right? Because it's very
Mhm.
humanizing. And if the dichotomy that Blake is seeing is either, humans slash people or monsters, that puts her more in the people camp than the
Mhm.
monster camp. And that saves her from Blake's murder spree.
Right, and like, the 2 bearded brothers who can't say that they're not monsters or whatever,
Mm,
like, also seem to have a pretty strong, like, familial bond and, like, brotherly love, and, like, at
mm,
one point, um, the one asks Blake to, like, stop, trying to kill his brother, like, because his brother had, like, just lost his wife, like, just seen his
mm,
wife horribly die or whatever, like,
yeah.
there's obviously like love and compassion between them, um and there wasn't any insinuation that they were, you know abusive toward their wife or whatever, unlike the necromancer. And so it's just like, if Blake had come across a different situation, would Joyce be dead? And Gale and whatever.
Yeah, that's why I think this chapter is so smartly constructed, is because there's just enough in there for us to still have plausible deniability that Blake is doing a version of the right thing. You know what I mean? Yeah, which is I think is so interesting, because he's our protagonist. We're still following him as he goes around murdering folk. Like, I don't know. So yeah, we can't be too against his actions, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's also that we've seen him go through so much. It kind of, and with the abyss is really the big thing, is it makes sense to why he's gotten to this point, but it is like upsetting. And one thing that's upsetting is the fact that Evan just doesn't seem to have a problem with this. Like, I guess he just really, really trusts Blake.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just seems to me like when Blake hops over the fence and like leaves the Thorburn property, he's no longer he's crossed a line. And like, that's kind of weird, because this is sort of like him going into the forest to fight the hyena, and that was obviously a good thing.
Yeah.
And if these are monsters, then this is like that.
Yeah. I think the thing that to me made that feel the most real is there's a part where Evan like goes for one of their eyes, and it's like, okay, now Evan is complicit in this violence, which I think is across the line in one or two different ways, and it's just a bit too much,
Right? Because we've seen Evan, go for people's eyes before, like, do these sorts of things before, when the Behames are like actively attacking Blake at the Toronto police station or whatever. Like, we've seen Evan like really like fight for Blake, but this feels so different.
Yeah, they kind of, after they've killed these fools, they then have this this little debrief that I think is really interesting as well, where Blake is like, oh, I don't know if she deserved, Jan, that one of the people here, deserved to have her midsection degloved, which we haven't talked about, but it's fucking crazy. And Green Eyes is like, I can smell that she was a monster, and I was kind of, there's this one bit where Blake looks at Evan in response to this, and Evan shrugs his little bird wings, and that's like, again, just to me, it's like, no, Evan should have more of a problem with this. I'm kind of really worried that he's going along with it.
Right. I mean, like, at this point, it's over, and I'm glad Blake doesn't like, gainsay Green Eyes or whatever, or like forswear Green Eyes potentially, because she promised to be good.
Yeah, I think she's, I trust that she sensed monstrousness in Jan.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, the fact that Evan shrugs, it's pointing to how he's kind of just going along with the situation and not critically thinking about it.
Yeah.
Which is upsetting. The thing with Jan, well, one, Green Eyes is so fucking scary.
Yeah, I know, right? Jesus Christ.
I put desweatered in my notes, which felt sort of funny, and also I hate it. Like, it's so much. And it's interesting because Joyce leaves Jan there, like, explicitly. Jan, like, she's like, Gale, come with me, Gale. And Jan's like, should I go too? What's happening? And she's like, no, Jan, you stay here.
Yeah, so dog choice. Wow.
Which is so like, and it's this interesting thing where Blake is like decided that Joyce is okay enough, and determines, oh, she was trying to get Gale away from the husband, and that means that the husband must be bad, and she decided that these other people were fine to die as well, or whatever. But like, we don't really know exactly what is happening or what the dynamics between these people are. Like, there's pieces of evidence, like the Green Eyes' belief that she's not a person, that Jan wasn't really a person anymore. The way the necromancer reacts when Blake accuses him of being, a really shitty husband.
Just asks him if he's a monster as well. Like,
right, and that bit, like there's definitely things that point to this being the right interpretation.
Yeah.
But we don't really know.
No, we don't.
But something about Joyce taking advantage of this situation makes me like her more, which is
It's such a wild thing to do, to be like, oh, you're going to murder them? Well, let me just save one of them, and the rest, no, yeah, they're fair enough.
I mean, there's especially the moment when Jan's like, oh, should I go too? It's clear that she's not just like trying to save as many as she can. She's
Yeah.
like, Gale is cool.
Well, yeah, I mean, Blake kind of interpreted it as like she has sworn not to interfere with him culling the rot. And so he then takes Joyce's selections as rot and not, and kind of, you know, it's Jan's fair game to be degloved. I love the way that works, by the way. Green Eyes, we get like, Green Eyes brings her tail up and around Jan's waist, and you're like, oh, okay. And then there's like this kind of step out to an abstract narration about how this works. It's delightful. It's so gross. I love it.
Because I remembered the way her tail was against the others in the house, and it's just described as being like barbed and various things. And so the moment that happened, I was like, oh god. And I guess like with Blake too, you're reminded in the first chapter we read for this week that she has that, because when she unwraps from Blake, he like spins around.
Yeah, good setup and payoff there for sure.
Yes.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, Green Eyes loves like jumping up onto Blake and like grabbing onto his midsection and like hanging off of him, which is their, you know, it's their kink. That's fine. But then, yeah, that is also the way that she murders a person. It's just so great.
Yeah. Her calling out like she wasn't a someone anymore. It brought back bad memories.
Yeah.
Is really sad. It reminded me of Tiff. And now I have this whole thing where like, is everyone cut in half? Like, is Tiff like?
What a twist that would be! Wow.
I don't even know where we're going.
Yeah, every single person is two halves. That's how soulmates work, I guess. Yeah.
There's Paige and Peter, right? There's there's probably more.
Yeah. Do you think Paige and Peter are, you know, have been spliced?
I mean, no.
That was a very on the fence no.
I'm gonna say no.
Okay, I say it with conviction, huh? No.
But then there is the like Andy and Eva. Oh, Andy and Eva. That's another pairing. Yeah. Blake calls out how Andy and Eva like actually kind of get along. So obviously it's not like him and Rose.
Yeah, rough. What if not getting along isn't part of it, and him and Rose are just shit?
That'd be great.
Yeah. But so yeah, Blake is fully done with these folks. Yeah, I guess he also like has a bit of cleanup on them as well, doesn't he? Yeah, good times.
Yeah, he uses their blood to draw a circle, which is, you know, resourceful.
Yep.
And he frees the spirit or the soul in the necromancer's healing voodoo doll thing, which was nice. I liked that moment.
Yeah.
There are like things that suggest that Blake is not completely gone.
Yeah.
And that was one of them.
Yeah. So yeah, then Blake continues on his murder spree. He finds some behames, but as he's about to enter murder mode, he gets stopped by a giant suit of armor that does some chronomancy shit, and also Rose is there, and they're not married, engaged. So, as somebody who's planning a wedding yourself, do you have any tips for Rose and Alistair?
Yeah, I was wondering what kind of engagement ring she had. I'm assuming silver. She seems like that kind of person. Little diamond. Wonder what the cut is. They
Yeah, do you think Blake will be excited for her?
So excited. Oh god, Rose. Well, here we'll get to Rose last because she's fun. It's fun seeing like actual chronomancy, presumably.
Mm,
It seems like this night may or may not be some like the big kahuna they were talking about, and
yeah.
it can like actually influence time somewhat. I mean, we saw that Alistair was using time to like eliminate cuts and whatever.
Mm,
So we've seen like actual chronomancy a little bit in this story, but this is kind of an exciting like, oh fuck, can y'all actually turn back time with this guy?
mm.
And
Yeah, I mean, it
yeah.
seems pretty powerful, right? Because Blake like does starts his murder spree, gets one of
Mm-hmm.
them, and then it just kind of gets completely undone. And this is the hyena notoriously not able to be healed, I
Right.
guess,
Right.
being kind of not healed per se, but similar, right? Being undone,
Right.
and that feels like it's a strong, it's an implication of a certain level of strength.
Definitely. Yeah. And it's yeah. I mean, thinking about chronomancers giving up hours, he describes them as being like cows a couple of
Hmm.
chapters ago, like just giving and giving and giving parts of them their lives to someone else. And thinking, I don't know, it's hype being like this is the we're gonna see the big guns, like this is the culmination possibly of all of that.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah. Um and again, pointing out that Blake's justification for killing the first guy is bad and just literally like because right now he's like, Alistair, this is a bad idea, blah blah blah. We shouldn't do things this way. And I'm like, and it's a fun thing of like, is he talking about Rose or is he talking about using all of the family's magic or whatever?
Mm.
Um it's like a little unclear. Um
So
but
the person that Blake kills is, and the reason for Blake killing him is just because he's argued on behalf of Alistair against peace, and literally Blake's next line is good enough.
yeah, yeah,
Is it? Is it Blake?
no.
That's
That
how we
that
define a monster nowadays. I mean, I guess.
no. No. He didn't even ask him, "Hey, can you tell me that you're not a monster?" Like he didn't
Yeah,
even do that.
yeah.
So yeah, when it's reversed, like on the one hand you're kind of like, "Oh fuck," because there's like crazy chronomancy happening, but it was a relief because like, no, Blake, don't just murder this man.
Mm,
Um and Ben is sad and has sad eyes, and that was sad cuz I like him.
mm,
Um but yeah, and then Alistair's all like, me, I'm fucking cool.
yeah.
And there's Rose. God, Rose.
Yeah, so Twist, Rose and Alistair are engaged,
Oh my
seemingly, or
god.
unless it's just a big prank. I mean, you know,
JK.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and Blake realizes, or, just believes that she wanted to leave the house and get taken by Sandra at all. Um,
Mm,
because then it would be, she'd have an opportunity to arrange this marriage.
mm,
Um, and that's upsetting. The fact that she's like left the cabal and her family, although she doesn't care about them, but like to be, attacked in this house is upsetting. A lot of things are upsetting about
mm,
this scenario. The one thing that gives me some hope is that the arc is called Duress, and maybe she was somehow forced into this, but
hmm.
if anything, it's probably the other way around.
What, she forced Alistair into proposing?
Or just, yeah, the whole Behames or something. Like, he seems fine enough with it, but
Mm,
she, yeah, just Blake kind of thinking, oh, she's been planning this, she did this on purpose, undermines that a bit.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, for sure.
and I feel very upset on behalf of Ty and Tiff and Alexis, let alone, the rest of them, that
Yeah,
she isn't helping. Um, like this seems like a very Rose centric move and not like anything else.
yeah. It's an interesting one. The only thing that could match Blake's pure chaos energy, I think, is
Oh yeah,
an equally chaotic plan by Rose.
that's true. That is sort of inspiring. Um,
Yeah, Rose was inspired by Blake.
uh, I also think it's funny that he's like, they dress like douchebags and they're holding each other's hands, and I hate this. Like, he just like, he's
Yeah,
so good.
they matched in sheer pretentiousness. Good times. Yeah.
Uh,
Well, yeah, those are our chapters for today.
yay.
Yay, yay. What do we think's gonna? Well, I guess there's a section here called Malia's bold and specific prediction in our notes. What do you think's gonna happen next?
Well, so I have to admit that I know who the interlude is from the point of view of, because I was like just speeding through the story at this point and I didn't remember having already clicked next chapter. And so I clicked next chapter and I read like maybe a sentence and then I was like, wait.
Shame on
So
you.
I know, my bad. I can't predict that one this time, but
Yeah.
I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we're gonna get a little time jump or not. So we learned that it's like 2 a.m, which means that
Mm.
there's maybe, I don't know what time the sun rises in Canada at this time of
Yeah,
year,
4 or
but
5 hours maybe.
yeah. And they must have spent a ton of time building Blake's body, or the Abyss did a time warp thing, because the nights, progressed.
Well, they were climbing up the tenements for a little while, weren't they? How long? I don't know. Maybe not that long, but
I guess I just assumed that, like, if it was more than like 15 minutes, they all would have just died. Because, like, I would have. But
yeah, fair enough.
I have no idea. But yeah, because I'm not sure if it's like we're just gonna like come back to this backyard or whatever this is, or if we're gonna flash forward a little bit. But God, it's like, yeah. So there's the Thorburns and the Cabal in the Abyss, sort of still. I'm assuming they have left the Abyss officially and gone to figure something else out. I think that Blake and Rose are going to yell at each other.
That's an easy one. Come on. Yeah. Cool. I mean, Blake and Rose yell at each other. Fair enough.
I don't think Rose and Alistair are actually going to get married.
Oh, interesting. What, you think they'll break off the engagement or something?
That, yeah, like one of them will die, or I guess maybe be forsworn. They probably didn't put a no forswearing clause.
Do you think they have a prenup?
I just
Do you
feel
get
like
a prenup before you get engaged? Probably not, right? That's before the actual marriage, surely.
I mean, you could maybe get a prenup before you get engaged. I don't know. Because is an engage, so like, will you marry me? Yes. Is that a promise, or is that just a statement of fact? Like, the line between forswearance and gainsaying is something that I have trouble with.
Yeah, but I think the fact there's so much ritual around like an engagement is a promise to be married effectively, right? Like that probably lends it enough weight that it is effectively a pretty important vow.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, like, but just based on like the cultural cachet that an engagement has, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, but like broken engagements are kind of like much more of a thing. But like, because we know that like Raquel was forsworn when she said that she wouldn't marry that guy, but it might be like they made her promise specific things in a more
specific and vowful way.
Right, as opposed to like, maybe you don't want to actually promise to definitely marry a diabolist.
Yeah.
Just like, what's his fucking play? I don't think the family is happy with this. And it feels like, because if this is just a power grab to become the lord or whatever, like if you're a lord and you have a diabolist wife, like that feels like people are gonna come try to kill you.
Yeah.
I don't know.
People will definitely talk. You won't be invited to the nice cotillions, I don't think.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to see, I suppose. Now, of course, the show's called Pale in Comparison. Shall we, is there any other things that we want to compare to from Pale?
Yeah, so, Elliot actually reached out with a suggestion that the Pact 12.7.x and Pale, was it 21.7, I think?
Mm.
Are kind of similar. So spoilers for 21.7, I guess, if you haven't read there yet. But it's both like a very major event has happened that shakes all of these people, and we go through and see a couple different perspectives of like how that event has impacted these people. Um and that's fun.
Yeah, I really like that type of chapter. I think Wildbow's done it once or twice in Pale, and I'm sure he's done it in other things of like the fallout of this event and seeing a few different glimpses of it as an interlude. It's always so fun to just be like, to see the ripples that big actions have on the world around them. I think is great.
Yeah, and the scale is interesting with the two, because with Blake, it's like the people at the factory and like, the
Mm,
shepherd and the eye, but they were all very involved in like the specific,
yeah,
the specific plot. And we're not introduced to anyone completely new, but it's not like, oh, the physical people kind of in this space. It's like, the big scary monster dude way over there, and then,
yeah. The
their
Bjorgman.
right. And their friend way over here who literally falls over because they've done this thing. And like, so just in a fun way of the scale of Wild Bow protagonists and their shit has like
Mm,
increased.
yeah,
And hopefully, yeah, Pack doesn't try to compete because demons are bad.
yeah. I mean, very true. Yeah, I kind of like it's funny. It's an interesting kind of connection that this chapter. I think we see Blake crossing some lines, and in recent chapters with Lucy and Pale, we saw her crossing the line of shooting, effectively murdering somebody.
Uh-huh.
Again, extenuating circumstances in both, but it's interesting that those are both that have both happened in these stories at the same time.
Right? Yeah. Um yeah, and Lucy's feels much more understandable in a whole bunch of ways, but it is still a thing that I think a lot of us were worried about Lucy experiencing or choosing to do. And Blake, it's just like Blake.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, Blake.
Blake. Another fun thing is that you suggested the spoiler tag or whatever they're called for this week, and we sort of realized that Blake and Ridget are weirdly similar.
That's so harsh for poor Blake.
I know. Well, their murderous tendencies and their forest themes.
Well, yeah, it is fair to say that Ridget would definitely fit in Blake's new aesthetic, both committing genocides and being forest themed. So maybe that's another point for the Blake brand consultant book that we're putting together.
Definitely. Gotta get some of those scary squirrels. Although, like, it's also not a great vibe. Like, at least Blake doesn't seem to have a racist element to it so
Yes,
far.
true.
And so
So
that's
far,
cool.
man. Is that a
I mean,
bold and specific prediction?
well, I'm not sure if he's gonna flip and be like, all practitioners are
Yeah, sure.
evil and deserve to
Are
die or
evil.
whatever.
Yeah.
I don't think he'll go racist in like the sense that we think of.
Sure, but a very like anti-practitioner. He already kind of is quite anti-practitioner.
Uh-huh.
So it wouldn't be too much of a stretch for that to continue, I suppose.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Blake and
needs
Ridget,
some
the dream team.
therapy.
Yeah, Blake needs some therapy again. Could be the subtitle to this entire story. Well, should we talk about the discussion question?
Yes. So last week we asked to describe the worst field trip or vacation that you've ever had.
Mm.
And yeah, on reflection, these weren't like necessarily the funniest or whatever.
Yeah, isn't it great when you come up with an idea for a discussion question like this, and you're like, "Yeah, this will be interesting," and then you're like, "Oh yeah, of course." I mean, they're all like bummers. No, I thought there was definitely some interesting stuff to a bunch of these. It was kind of fun to hear about people's horrible vacations.
Yeah, sometimes they are actually pretty funny, but also, yeah.
Yeah. We got a response from Wildbow telling the story for what might actually be the inspiration for the Tenements. a hostel that was so horrible that the owner came in and offered them a refund without them even complaining first, which is pretty hardcore.
That's amazing.
It sounded rough. It was a kind of Parisian hostel with miscellaneous screaming and bloodstains and,
Oh god.
effectively straight out of a horror movie stuff.
I love that the like owner is so aware that they come in and they're like, "Hey, I'll like sorry."
No, this is not what you don't want to be here. Nobody wants to be here. Kind of, yeah.
Megafire 7 talks about a time that they got flung into the air by some people running into an air pillow.
Yeah, which so they were talking about this like campground and there being an air pillow a large air pillow, and just kind of dropped that as if, is that something that I should know?
People
Is
know
that
what
like
that
an
is.
American thing or something? Like, what's a giant air pillow?
The only thing I can think of is like on the water, like the blob, there's those big things where one person will jump onto it and the other person will be sitting at the end and they'll get like launched up into the air and land in the water. But I don't know what it is in this circumstance.
Yeah, I was kind of picturing like a half inflated jumping castle, bouncy castle. But I have no idea. I have really no idea what it is. Anyway, also as part of this story, they ran out of gas and somebody was inspecting it using like a lighter fire as a light source around a gas canister, which again was pretty chaotic. So that definitely fits in the theme of poor fire safety practices that we had in the first chapter from this week, at least.
Yeah, this one I think does. I think like a bouncy castle would be the closest thing. I can't. Yeah, the fact that
I'm
it almost
gonna
sets on fire.
Google air pillow and see if I can. Giant, large air pillow. I mean, maybe it is just what it describes, I guess. I'm just seeing like bed pillows for like inflatable mattress and stuff.
What do you
So
think?
not
Bouncy castle is in Dutch. Bouncy castle.
it doesn't just translate to air pillow.
Well, Springkasteel.
Mm,
Unclear. Let us know.
unclear. Yeah, that's our new discussion question. What does jumping
What's
castle
the
translate in Dutch? Yeah, very specific one.
name?
We got an answer from RL Raider on Reddit talking about it like a medical related trip for their son that had some chaotic vibes as the son accidentally pulled out their feeding tube, and effectively this trip turned into a pharmacy sightseeing tour trying to figure that out. And then they mentioned something called Gerb Kazaz. Again, not sure what that is. Is that something that you know what it is?
No.
I was hoping you would know what it is, because when I was reading through some of this, I was like, maybe there's some like American or specifically Hawaiian reference that I'm not understanding.
It does. I think from context, it seemed like maybe food. Was that
It
true?
did seem it was a Mediterranean food
Right.
dish, maybe, but I googled it and all I got was an autocorrect for Herb Kazaz, a character from BoJack Horseman. So
Yep.
I was really
Same.
struggling on that one.
And then finally, Hobo Demon said or described two vacations. One where they went to Florida, but they were fired for missing too much work, and that sucks.
Yeah.
And then another one where they went to Indianapolis for cancer treatment, but it seems like it didn't work because it led to the
yeah, like this was a very well told story because they were told in reverse chronological order. But yeah, it's very interesting. A real messy situation. It sounded like that led to some fun vacations at least. But the worst field trip / vacation vibe was more the surrounding context for them rather than the actual vacation themselves. It seems
right cancer and unemployment, both bad.
Yes. I mean, they are. So, thanks everyone for leaving your discussion question answers. Now, time for our new discussion question.
So I have like an idea germinating. I'm not sure how to put it. I'm thinking like so there's Rose is maybe getting married, and then like Blake should maybe start some sort of like niche events business, and like maybe some sort of like pick a character from Pale and tell us about like the
Yeah.
cool business they could have at a wedding or
Yeah.
something like that.
What could their side hustle be at Rose and Alistair's wedding? Yeah, I like that. If Blake is the bonfire, the Dial-A-Bonfire guy.
Right.
Yeah.
You need a caterer, you need a photographer, you need all sorts of things at weddings. And
The
so
coconut
what
one
could
actually sounded pretty good as well. For sure.
Yeah, that one is really fun. Musicians, I don't know, all sorts of things.
So yeah, pick a character from Pale, I guess, and tell us what their wedding side hustle business is. That makes sense, I think.
Yeah.
You can leave your answers to that discussion question in the Reddit thread.
Yes.
Yeah.
It'll be up there and you can find it. Or in the Discord, but sometimes the answers are harder to find. So if you want to make sure we find it, the Reddit thread's the best place.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, thanks for listening, everybody. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe, share it with your friends, leave a rating and a review. If you want to support the podcast, you can go to patreon.com/duffmedia. And if you'd like to support Wildbow as he continues to write these fantastic stories, you can go to patreon.com/Wildbow.
You can follow the pod on Twitter at PaleComparison or send us an email at paleincomparisonpod@gmail.com. Keep an eye out for our Reddit thread in r/parahumans, where you can answer a discussion question and share your thoughts on this episode. In addition, if you would like to see all of my predictions laid out, check out our episode description for a link to a prediction tracker. Next episode, we will be covering chapter 12.x.
Yeah, history. And of course, as we said before, it is now the costume contest, the Wildbow costume contest has closed. So if you want to vote on that, all Duff Media patrons will be able to at the Patreon, which is, as we said before, patreon.com/DuffMedia. So go there, become a patron if you're not already, and vote on some killer costume.
Yes. And thank you to all of our patrons for voting and all of the people who submitted entries. Y'all are great.
Yeah. Now, before we go, a little fun fact. One lightning bolt has enough energy to toast 100,000 pieces of bread.
Wow. Now I'm imagining a field of like
covered
solar panels, but instead of solar panels, it's bread.
Yeah. Or do you think if a bolt of lightning struck like a field of grain, toast would just pop out?
Yeah, definitely.
I'm sure that's how that works. Yeah.
Yeah, our ancestors must have been super bored because the fact that you can take something like wheat and turn it into bread doesn't make sense.
Well, so to take, wheat and turn it into bread, you have to like grind it down, you have to get it wet, and then you cook it, right?
Well, first you have to like thresh it or something. You have to identify that there's a little thing in that thing that can be dealt with. And then, you have to grind it to shit.
Yeah.
And then once you got that, you accidentally spill some water on it. Maybe you can figure something out, but I don't know.
Well, like I'm trying to figure out, is there a way that through a very unlikely series of natural disasters, a field of grain could be turned into bread, right? So like maybe there's a landslide first and like that grinds it down. And then there's some heavy rain to like mush it all up and stuff, maybe a flood. And then some bolts of lightning. And then suddenly naturally forming toast in the world could be possible.
I love it. It's probably how it happened.
That's probably how we first discovered toast naturally in the wild. Thought, we could try that. Yeah, we could make that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining me for this episode, Jen Ben. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, anytime. I'm here every week.
That's true. Yeah. It just felt especially special this week.
No, it was very fun.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.